but I'm going to start, I think at 7. And last time I'm going to go to sharing screen so I can go to the page we had last time.
Oh, I feel bad. I moved it for this week and now we have less people. That's my fault. Sorry.
I'm sorry I didn't hear that.
You guys wanted to meet last week and I was being selfish and said, can we do it this week? And now no one's here.
Well, we lost a few people. No big deal.
Sorry.
We'll be fine.
Okay.
Well,
Well, we got Lindsay.
Yeah, we
Lindsay.
So last week we went through the first 4 verses in Love Thy Neighbor, and I was going to continue from there, but I'm thinking I would rather have more interaction than just me reading verses and telling you what I think, or I'd like more interaction. So one of the things Gail suggested is we could just, if you guys would just ask questions, that when you hear the term love thy neighbor, what does it mean to you? What are your questions that pop up, and what kind of question pops in your mind to say, how does that fit into God's plan, or whatever the question is that you come up with? So anybody, Gail, you might want to kick it off since you already thought about this a little bit.
Okay, the question I came up with was, or statement is, love your neighbors easy when the people are nice and you enjoy being around them, and it's this is, but then you get that friend that's so needy and calling and bugging you or irritating you all the time, and it's a little more difficult to love them. And I would just wondered how long, I mean, do you deal with somebody like that before you decide, or do you ever decide that they're going to drag you down into the black pit they're in and you're not helping them any? So is there, how do you know when to cut somebody off, or just to say, I love you, but I just can't be with, communicate with you on a daily basis because or a monthly basis, or however long it is, before you stop?
Well, it's not saying you have to be best friends with everyone. And it actually never uses the word friend, which I think is interesting. It says love thy neighbor.
Right.
And so I think you can love someone without having to be their punching bag, I guess is one way of wording it. And, just because you're not going to be their person and their friend, it doesn't say you have to be everyone's friend. It just says love thy neighbor. So don't spread ill will about them, or I don't know. That's kind of how I think of it.
Now that's good.
That's good.
Well, there's different forms of loving, right? Sometimes there's tough love. So maybe that person does need you to give a little bit more of the tougher version.
I like that, Worms.
Anybody else? Well, when you were asking the question, it made me think about, there's a movie called Meet John Doe. Meet John Doe? Isn't that right, Gil? It doesn't sound right when I said it, but I'm sure that's
Meet Joe Black?
no.
The Boy Scout thing?
John Doe. It's not Boy Scouts. He starts out the clubs all over the country. Well, anyway.
That's Meet John Doe.
Meet John Doe. That's what I thought. Okay, so anyway, and Meet John Doe, there's the whole premise of the idea is that you are supposed to show love to your neighbors and see what you can do to help your neighbors. And when they in this little town, when they were talking about it, the people that were joining the John Doe Club, they were saying, well, I've got this neighbor and he's like impossible. He screams and yells and he ignores me when I say hi and all this other stuff. And I'm tired of it, And then one day I found out he's almost deaf. He wasn't ignoring me. He couldn't hear me. And he was yelling because he's deaf. So he had to talk really loud, he thought, so that you'd hear him, since he was having such trouble hearing you. And when they got to know him, they found out he was a really nice guy. So, I mean, unfortunately, we don't know what our neighbor's circumstance is, whether they're deaf or they've had abusive problems, or, you know, they've dealt with alcohol, or what their problems are. And when I think of love thy neighbor, and I love the fact that he goes on and says, love your enemies, not just your neighbors. And then he also says, I think I have this one down here a little further.
I can hear the birds.
Yeah, you can. If you see this one down here, Matthew 5:46, for if we love them which love you, if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same?
Yeah.
So he's saying that person, you never know when the whole idea of us loving our neighbor is that we're supposed to be shining God's light to them, because maybe they've never had any light or very much light shined on them in their whole life. You know, they may have had people that didn't show them any love. So they built a shell to protect themselves. And so at some point, do you get impatient or tired of them? And because I know when he talks about forgiveness, he says, he's asked, you know, how many times should I forgive? Should I forgive 7 times before I stop forgiving? And Jesus' response was, you should forgive 70 times 7. So whenever you hear a big number, whenever the Bible talks about a number that seems really large, like that's 490 times, it's really saying you're not supposed to stop forgiving. No matter what they do, keep forgiving, because that's what he does to us.
Hopefully.
He does. He forgives us all the time. Yeah, loves us and forgives us. So I don't know. I think the answer to your question is maybe we need to change our attitudes. I know it's not easy to do. But I think maybe you've hit on a point that now I'm going to have to think about it a little more. I think we have to change our own attitudes. So if somebody's bothering us, maybe we have to do like they did in that movie where you go over and talk to him and you find out he's deaf or what his problem is, and show him some kindness and love and break through that shell. We've seen a lot of movies now that I'm thinking about it, that you have somebody who has a protective shell built around them that they try to push other people away because they don't want to be hurt again. And then when somebody gets close enough to them to show them they're not going to try to hurt them, their whole attitude changes. So, anybody else have a comment on that one?
I think if you change your mentality on it, and really, I think to your point, like if you go into every relationship or interaction assuming best intentions and like understanding that you don't know what people are going through, I think you end up being just like, it makes you a better person, and you don't like get stressed out, and you don't do things that maybe aren't great either. It's like, it's kind of one of those things where if you let other people's, like, if you assume something about somebody else and it makes you stressed out or makes you do something, like, I feel like that's on you. So if you change that like approach a lot and the love thy neighbor, it just makes you a better person in general. Like, even like you're helping them, but you're also you're helping yourself as well as people around you. Maybe you're not as irritable or, stressed out. So it's a really like kind of profound thing to do it, and to not assume something about somebody just because that's what's in your head. Like, have best intentions, and no matter what, just keep forgiving them. If you have that mentality, you won't be stressed out when someone keeps failing you over and over again.
That's interesting that you phrase it that way, because when I was learning myself to do cold calling, I eventually figured out how many people I had to talk to, knowing how many no's I would get before I got my yes. And so I got it down to where it was 1 out of 10 that I actually got to talk to. So I knew that when I got a no, I didn't have to be mad about it or upset or impatient or anything else, because I had to have another no to get to the 9 no's to get to that 1 yes. So it didn't bother me. So maybe if I do the same kind of a thing with people who might at first be a nuisance to me or rub me the wrong way, maybe if I have a little more patience and say, okay, you need to change your attitude. I have to change, in other words, my attitude, not, and then the question I think that Gail asked that I'm still trying to decide about is there ever a point when you have less contact with them so that, you know, if they're real irritants? I don't have a good answer for that. I don't think you can stop loving them. And
Maybe if
what were you going to say?
I said maybe if there's a safety issue.
Yes, I think that's definitely true. Yep.
Sometimes we might not think about that their experiences, and particularly childhood and all of that, were very different, might be very different than ours. And we've been very fortunate to grow up with the values and the good things that we have. And, you know, a lot of people have a lot of baggage from before, and that might be affecting them as adults as well.
Yep, I agree.
That's true.
All right, what other questions you want to have us talk about a little bit when this, under this umbrella of love thy neighbor? So if we had Jesus sitting here with us and we wanted to ask him a question, what would it, about this issue? Is there any questions that come to your mind so that we can discuss them?
I still think you'd go back to, when do you show tough love? When do you show, no, when do you not? I think that's such a good question. I feel like that's like, it's hard to know that level of like, how many times do you let yourself be hurt, or how can you not be hurt by something somebody does and let it brush off you so that you can forgive them? I don't know. I think that's a really tough thing to just kind of figure out.
Yeah, when you say tough love, you're talking about you showing tough love to them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Of saying, hey, I'm done like with this towards me, I guess, or something. And I don't know,
No, I get it.
I feel like there's people in my life that are easy to forgive when something happens, but you know, then you keep forgiving and forgiving. And then when do you, like, I have a neighbor actually that I finally gave up trying to make an effort when her dog hit me on the butt. That was like my final straw. Chihuahua that got me.
What?
Did you not hear about this? Anyway, I don't know.
I didn't hear what you said. Say it again so I can hear it.
I said I finally gave up when the Chihuahua bit me on the butt with
Oh,
my
yeah.
neighbor.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, should I not have? I don't know. The Chihuahua got me though, and it was like my final straw. So
Definitely that's a safety issue. So I would definitely think you don't expose yourself to the dog again. Yeah, that's definitely a safety issue. But you know, when you think about tough love, I mean, you have to do that with your kids and grandkids. You have to show them tough love, but they have to know first that you love them before you can do that. And so maybe that's the same kind of principle where you have to love them and they have to understand you love them, and then you can tell them what they're doing that's, you know, hurting you, you know, making you feel bad. And I think you can have those kinds of conversations with people. And I think there's a good chance that they'll change too.
Yeah, a lot of times I feel like people don't realize they're doing things that are offensive because you don't know what you don't know. It reminds me, I used to be a counselor in my way back days, and we used to call it the I statement. You say, I feel, because no one can say you don't feel the way you feel. But you
Right.
say, you know, I felt very upset when the Chihuahua bit me on the butt. And, you know, I just needed to let you know that because I value our relationship. I value you as a neighbor. And I felt like I'd be doing our relationship a disservice by not bringing that up and just harboring that in silence.
It's very good. Yeah, it's amazing how those kinds of conversations can change relationships. You know, and if the person chooses not to return love and chooses to shut you out because you said something like that, then that's their choice. but at least you gave them a chance.
Yeah.
I've heard the phrase of detach with love, and it seems like when the time comes that, it's just not a healthy connection for you, that sometimes that's necessary, but it's the attitude in which you kind of let go of that connection rather than with anger and
Right.
hurt and all of that.
That's great. Yep, exactly. Yeah. All right. Anything else how about another question to want to ask about love thy neighbor? Well, there's a little, in this 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. How do you feel about that? So if I fear my neighbor, I don't have perfect love with them, right? If that Chihuahua is going to bite me again.
Well, I think it's also saying that when you truly love someone, no matter what they do, you don't worry about, you don't have to stress or fear, because like you love them and it's going to be okay. Like your kids, no matter what your kids, like, I don't know, I felt this way about my little rugrats, is no matter what they do, I still love them no matter what. And I don't fear, like I have no fear of that my love's going to go away. And so I do truly love them, and nothing they can do could really change that.
Right. Well, that's one of the things he says to us is, if we're going to have perfect love, we have to rest in his love. And that's how eventually it becomes perfect love. But he's saying there's no fear in love. So I guess it's more like short-term versus long-term thinking. If we really believe everything Jesus told us, then we know what he's got planned for us, what the Father has planned for us already. So there's going to be a heaven that's eternity, that we're all going to live together, and everybody's going to love thy neighbor perfectly. We're all going to love each other all the time. So if we know that's the long-term thing, and maybe we can take into consideration, okay, I'm not going to fear, I'm not afraid, because if you think about it, how else could people have shared in the first century Christian church? How else are they going to share their love of Jesus with other people when the Romans, as soon as they found out who they were Christians, or even some of the Jews at the time, if they found out they were Christians, they would be persecuted, and the Romans would feed them to lions and put them on, nail them up on a wooden cross. So they couldn't have fear, because then they wouldn't be able to spread God's love, and God's love's perfect. So he doesn't promise us that in this life we're not going to have pain and suffering. He doesn't promise us that. He said we can still have joy even in our fact that we're going to face trials and tribulations in this life. But this life isn't about us being happy all the time, just like heaven's going to be, joyful all the time and happy all the time. But that's not what he's promised us in this life. So if we have to spend some time trying to help somebody that maybe isn't feeling loved, is maybe the way I'd phrase it.
Well, I also think that sometimes the fear can cause some of your own inner demons to come out, in a sense that if you fear someone next door, you might project what you think they're thinking. So you start causing it to be even worse, because you think, oh, I'm afraid of this person and they must be thinking this about me, and they probably did this because they don't like me. And you start kind of going down the downward spiral of that out of fear. And it causes all these other issues to pop up because you're projecting now.
That's very true. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's something that I think is built into our culture to some extent. You know, we've divided ourselves into these little divisions of all these little different groupings. And it could be something as simple as one denomination of Christian not liking another denomination of Christians just because somehow they don't believe the right thing, you know, as if we all know what the right thing is.
Well, and it's important to always try and start out with the thinking that the other person isn't out to get you, and they want what's best for you. If you start out with that attitude, I think that helps, that you don't have that immediate fear because you're going, really, they'd want to do what was best for me. So if you start with that attitude, I think that would helps.
I remember some of my lessons, my hard lessons that I've had to learn. You know, I was a bit of a bully and very impatient, and Gail, I'd watch her talk to these people on the phone, and myself, I would have been yelling at that person by now. Why are you putting up with them? She's taught me a lot about having patience and learning how to, you know, not have that attitude that they're trying to make things difficult for me. And it's made a big difference when I'm talking to people now. I have way more successes than failures now on the phone, where in the past it was kind of the other direction. So thank you for teaching me that, Gail.
Thank you for thinking I did that for you. I'm not so patient. I can remember you taking the phone from me one time.
Oh, one time, yeah. See, she can remember the one time it went the other way.
Don't mess with Gail.
Yeah.
She
Right.
shuts down the gas stations.
Yeah, but I think that having a positive attitude when you're interacting with other people and having an expectation that it's going to work out is the better way to go into every interaction.
And it's contagious. Then they bring that to their next interaction and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, you know, we were talking about people that are, you know, how long do you put up with people that are a pain in the necks kind of people? And I know in sports, when I was growing up, there'd be lots of times where I'd be with a group of guys and we'd be playing some sport, and there'd always be one or two people who have as big a competitive drive as I do. And so it's like this ego thing at first. And you know, sometimes you say that both you and they say things you know that aren't very nice to each other and stuff. But 3 or 4 years from after that, they're my best friends. It's very strange. It's hard to explain unless you've actually experienced it. But that happened to me numbers of times, not just once. So they started out as enemies, kind of, and turned in as friends.
Well, and the thing that is interesting to me about this whole love thy neighbor is, I think I was talking about it earlier too, is that it's more than just about the neighbor, it's about yourself. Like, I feel like this isn't like a one-sided thing, it's like a two-sided thing where it's like, if you're opening up and loving thy neighbor, you're just going to be a better person as well. And like Lindsay was saying, it's contagious. Like you'll, you know, have better interactions with everyone else. So it's like, we shouldn't think about it as like, oh, just helping your neighbor out. It's actually by loving your neighbor and going into those conversations or interactions with like, assuming that they have the best intent, is just, it's going to make the relationship, I guess more love in the relationship. And also it'll eliminate fear, or help eliminate fear, and make you a better person, make your interactions with all people better. And so it's really like helping you as well as helping thy neighbor. So it's like a multi or two-dimensional thing rather than just thinking about like helping your neighbor out.
No, that's what
On that, it makes you like, it makes you calmer, I think, because if you're constantly like trying to battle or be in angst with people, I think it's tough on you emotionally. Like it's exhausting by the end of the day. You know, when you're dealing with somebody who's upset or you're upset, it's tiring by the end. You're tired with all the conflict. So to try and cease the conflict and be the bigger person, I guess you could say, in some regards, sometimes in certain situations, of like being humble and not trying to prove a point or cause more conflict, to be the conflict resolution makes you feel better in the end.
Being humble is not easy. It's our pride that actually separates us from God, because we think we know better than God, so we don't need to be humble. But the humbler we are, the more we connect with God and the more peace we have. And that's why Jesus said he was going to leave us his peace, not as the world gives peace, but his peace. So he's saying, you know, you might have some stressful situations, like when, I think we've talked about before, when Paul and Silas were in prison, and you know, they could have been killed at any moment. They're in prison and they're singing, and the other prisoners hear it, the jailer hears it, and they're being joyful even though they're already been beaten, they're in shackles, and they're in prison, you know. So yeah, being humble enough to be able to say, I don't have to be right, I don't have to be first, I can be a servant, I'm willing to be a servant, because that's basically what God is talking about in this love thy neighbor. It's not loving your neighbor as being your neighbor's servant. That's really what he's talking about. So I know when he talks about in the garden with Adam, he's going to take the rib of Adam because and create a mate for him, a help meet is the way they phrase it. And you know, it might sound like when you first hear that, oh, that's like a second-class citizen or something, but no, because later in, I think it's in Isaiah, not sure if it's Isaiah, but anyway, he's referring to himself as he is the helpmeet for, I can't remember if it was Isaiah or Elijah or whoever. God is his helpmeet, or maybe David said that. That's not important. Important thing is that God is saying he is the helpmeet for David, just like Eve is the helpmeet for Adam. The point is that we're supposed to love each other and be on the same team, and all of us, and we're all supposed to be servants. So that's why Jesus was washing the feet of the disciples, so that he could show them, you know, that that's what they should be doing for other people. He told them that that's what they needed to be. And he also at another place said, if you want to be a leader, anybody that wants to be a leader should be a servant. And the problem is, in our society, we've got just the opposite. We want people, you know, people want to be recognized for being the star, the best, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, you know, that kind of stuff. And I don't see too many servants out there. I see a lot of people who want to be served, not servants. And that's not what God calls us to do. He calls us to be servants, helpmeets to each other. Anything else on love thy neighbor? I think that was the 3 topics for this one.
Oh, there wasn't another one? I thought there was another one.
Well, hate was the other one.
Mm.
But there's a verse here of Proverbs 10:12. Hatred stirreth up strifes, but love covereth all sins. So, you know, he doesn't really like hatred. God doesn't like hatred at all, because you can't love somebody and hate them at the same time. You just can't do that. So you can hate the activity. So if they sin, you can hate the sin, but you can't hate the person. You have to love the person. So there are going to be things that I do and that every one of you do, that is somebody else is going to hate that thing that you did because it was somehow hurtful to them. And none of us are perfect. And this minute we start thinking we're perfect, we're in a lot of trouble because we are not perfect. And I love that there's a pastor that I listen to all the time, and he was going through the lists of the things just to make sure that everybody in the room knew that he went through the 10 Commandments, and he talked about things in each one of them. And as soon as he got to it, you realize, oh, yes, I've failed in that area. So yes, okay, I sinned and I didn't do that one of the 10. He did it with all 10. So nobody in the room could they all got zeros out of 10. So that's to show us we're all, including him, even though he studied it for his whole, most of his life, we've all sinned all the time. So little things like, have you ever had a time where there was somebody you didn't like very much and they had something bad happen to them? And you thought, oh, maybe they deserve that. Maybe you gave a little cheer or something, or the other extreme where something good happened to them and you're mad about it or unhappy. So some examples of those kinds of things, like how many times have you had an election occur where the person you wanted won or lost, and it changed, and you came up with a negative attitude about it, right? So we've all sinned. We all have had those kinds of things happen, and none of us are perfect. So hatred is because he doesn't want us to hate, he wants us to love, which means you eventually would not be able to, just if you look at the very next one, 1 John 4:19, we love him because he first loved us. So we love God. Eventually, when we figure out who God is and understand that he loves us unconditionally, no matter what we've done, forgiven all our sins, we don't have to feel shame or guilt for anything we've done. It's over if we come to him. Once we get there, then we love him back. But it's not because we loved him first. It's because he loved us first. And then he goes on to say, if a man say, I love God and hateth my brother, he's a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? He wants us to understand that whole idea of hate and love. If you love God, you have to love everybody else because God loves everybody else. So there isn't room for hatred in there. You can hate the sin, which you can hate the sin you do yourself, like my own sins. I hate them. But you don't hate people. You have to love people. So there's hate. You have questions about hate? Seriously, do you have any other?
Not really a question, but like, I think the powerful thing here is when you see, I think you mentioned this maybe a month or two ago, Bill, about, when someone, like, there's a murder or something happens where someone kills people, and like the families come back and they say they don't hate this person. Like that's one of those things that's like so visceral and real, and like, you think about like, how could you not hate that person if they did something so horrible to your family? And like, for people to actually not do that, it's like, it's really powerful. I mean, I know if I were in their shoes, it'd be really hard for me not to hate that person. It's tough, it's a tough thing that I would probably have a hard time dealing with. And so it's like nice to see this and look at it in like a different way, but yeah, it's still kind of would be a tough thing to grapple with.
Well, and I feel like hate affects you more than it affects anyone else, right? So it's more like you're just sitting there ingesting poison, and it's not making you feel any better. It's not changing the situation. So I always say, what's the point? So I always try to like have the moment and understand where the feelings are coming from, and then they're real and they make sense, and then throw the poison out and try to refocus.
Yeah, it's like the two-sided thing, right? Like this is not just about the other person, it's about you.
Well, because you can hate them and that just impacts you. It doesn't impact them at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, many times they don't even know you did it, that it was bothering you even. But like the example you gave, Tyler, about the guy that went into the black church in Florida and killed 9 parishioners there. And then the families came to his trial and they all forgave him. That's exactly what Jesus did on the cross, right? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's exactly what he did. And the result, which you guys were both talking about, is that guy, Dylan Roof, that the people forgave, he broke down, and he couldn't believe that people would do that. So he gave his heart to Christ, and that's what prison fellowship does. They go into the prisons all over the country now. It's amazing how effective they are. And they help teach people about love and what God really is and who he is and what he does and what he's planning and the love part. And there are so many of those prisoners who have converted to Christianity and have changed their whole lives. They are no longer outcasts in society and are trying to do, and they're not doing anybody harm anymore. That's how the contagious part of love. And that's one of the things about that's difficult to know. When do you stop trying to show your love to a neighbor or who? But if a person can go into a court and forgive the person that killed their, father, sister, husband, wow, that's pretty powerful. So.
Well, I think I heard once, like, in order to give love, you have to love yourself first. So if giving that other person love is making you not love yourself, maybe work on yourself a little bit and then go back, try again.
I like that. Well, when you think about it, when I think about myself, yeah, I could see how I would not be loved, but God loves me. And once you really realize that God, the creator, the number one person, he loves you unconditionally, then you can start opening up and loving yourself. So yeah, I like that, Lindsay.
Well, and they say self-esteem is rooted in the need for unconditional love. So perhaps people who have gone down the bad road never felt that. And when they, like you mentioned in the prison, when they start meeting with the Christian Fellowship, they finally realize they've had it the whole time. And it's a healing process for them.
Yeah, I agree.
I like the prison show we watched, the documentary about it was one of the worst prisons in the country, and they were all in for life. They were never getting out of that prison. And a new warden came in and he initiated a program that the inmates could volunteer for, and they were to care for one another.
Hospice.
Yeah, do hospice, because there were so many, they were going to die in prison. So there's a lot of prisoners that are, on their last legs now. And so a number of the prisoners volunteered for the program, and they loved it so much. What they learned from helping each other was so powerful that more and more people volunteered to go through the training to do this. And it became a model prison because it changed the prisoners' attitudes so much, and they loved each other and understood each other and cared for each other so much that the whole atmosphere was completely flipped over. That was a great show.
I think it's in Arkansas, that prison. Yeah, so this is a true story. This really happened. Actually, it was a documentary. So
Yeah.
you actually saw the prisoners interacting with each other when they were so sick that they couldn't, take care of themselves anymore, and the other prisoner would have to clean them up and feed them, and yeah. And this goes back to the whole principle of the book, is to talk about the fact that God he only has one law, and that's the law of love. So in Rome, the first one on 13:8, the first one below the yellows, owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. And God says this so many times in the Bible, it's ridiculous, but He's saying if you just love everybody, you've already fulfilled the law. That's all there is. Of course, he considers himself one of the everybody's. He wants to be your neighbor, he wants to be my neighbor. And he proved that because he walked with us in the garden with Adam and Eve. Jesus walked with us here for 31 years or whatever it was, 33 years. And then he tells us about what heaven's going to be like, where God's going to actually live with us. So, he wants to be our neighbor, wants to live with us. So, yeah, and the first 4 commandments are all love God. And then the final 6 are love thy neighbor. So,
Mr. Rogers song just popped in my head. Won't you be my neighbor?
Mr. Rogers.
Dave Farm is there.
Mr. Rogers was an amazing character. I mean, he
Okay.
broke a lot of ground on that show.
Well, you mean a person?
Amazing person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was just who he was. I don't think he was playing a part. I think that was.
Oh, I
he was
agree.
him.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I'm saying on that show, he broke a lot of new ground. He did
Amazing.
things on that show that nobody had ever considered doing before. Like he had the black mailman and he washed his feet
Watched
on the
his feet.
show.
Yeah.
Servant. Yeah, he's serving.
Oh, yeah, he was pretty amazing. Yeah. All right. Anything else about Love Thy Neighbor? How are we doing time-wise? 41. So I think this is the format. If it's okay with you guys, I'm going to use this kind of format next time. Is this better than the other way? I'm not hearing yeses on that.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, if it's not, if you'd rather do it the other way, tell me.
No, I like this way.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I like this way.
Okay. So I'm gonna change what I'm sharing.
Kathy, do you like this way better?
Both ways are good.
What is it? So here's the book. And the thing about the book, I'm going to take a little section out of the book. Kathy knows this section well, so I'm going to read this section.
Oh,
This is talking about loving your neighbor and learning yourself, because it's not about the whole process of what I call sanctification, or what God calls sanctification, is about us examining ourselves and slowly having less of me and more of Jesus in what I do. Less of me and more of Jesus in everything I do, because it's really at the end, the whole principle of the Bible is based on really 2 things. You either love God or you love yourself, because if you love yourself more than you love God, you're going to have pride and you're not going to listen. So you're not going to hear all of the great things he's telling us to prove actually who he is and that he exists. But anyway, we're not supposed to judge other people. So when I go through these kinds of exercises, I'm trying to give an illustration of some of the wrestling I did and the reasoning I'm now doing with God about parts of my life, because that's what I think we're all called to do, each one of us. And that's why the biggest thing I'm trying to encourage people to do with this book is to get them to read the Bible for themselves, because until I read the Bible myself, I heard some things before, but I really didn't know what to believe or didn't really believe. So, and you don't really learn about sanctification until you've actually done it yourself. But anyway, here's an example. So near the house, our home here, there's an intersection coming down 68. It's a T intersection. So it's 1 lane each direction. And as you're coming down the hill, there's one light, and that light has a street coming into that intersection, a T intersection. So you can make a right there coming down from the freeway on that 1 lane road. You can make a right there that goes to the hospital, and that's it. It's the only thing there. So then you come out of the hospital, you get back on this street and you either go up or down the hill. Before the light and after the light, it changes from 1 lane to 2 lanes. So, excuse me, I'm a little frog in my throat. So for the first number of years that we lived here, I would always pull in the newly formed right lane, because you would get up to the light, and then when the light changed, you'd have green, but there'd be less people in that right lane, so you'd actually end up passing a few people. And I never really thought anything about it, and I just, it's a way to get around a few cars, get ahead of a few cars. But then I was reading the Bible, and there were some verses that kind of, that seems like that's a little selfish. That's like waiting in a line for a movie theater and then somehow sneaking in front of the 2 people in front of me or something. It just felt funny. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna stay in my own lane. And so I stayed in the lane, and then I saw cars pass me on the right, like I used to do. I'm going, what the heck are they doing? These rotten people, So here I am trying to judge them, but what I'm really doing is I'm reflecting on myself, I'm thinking, okay, now what? Okay, now my emotions, what caused that? Why am I upset now? I wasn't upset for those people I passed when it was the other way around. So anyway, so I got to see how that worked, and I said, okay, I can't get mad at these people anymore. And one of the ways I was getting mad at them is that when they would get on the right lane and it was their turn to merge back into my lane that I stayed in, the correct lane, where I was such a hero staying in that lane, I didn't like that. So I would make sure it was difficult for them to get back in the lane, teach them a lesson.
Can't possibly identify with that.
But here's what I learned. Staying in my lane and not passing the other cars was a demonstration of my love for my neighbor. So I was saying, okay, I do love you. I don't deserve to be in front of you, or I don't want to be in front of you. I love you, so I want to show you I love you. And then I learned that when I allowed them to pass me without complaining or being upset about the fact that they passed me on the right, I remembered that judge not. So now I'm not judging them anymore. They can pass me if they choose to, because how do I know I was in the same situation and I didn't know I was doing it. So they probably don't even know what they're doing. So I should not be judging them. And then when I let them merge back in, when they want to merge, that's showing them forgiveness. So that's really what God's trying to teach us. He wants us to try to take this to all parts of our lives, because if everybody starts doing it, can you think about all the things we read about in the newspaper or see on television or on the internet that shows people being hurtful and mean to each other would start going away, because everybody would be judging themselves, thinking about themselves, correcting their own behavior, not trying to point the finger at other people and always blaming other people and making them the problem when the problem is many times us. We're the problem.
Yeah, that's true. Another thing, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can go first.
No, go ahead, Lindsay.
Oh, I was just gonna say, how do you work on forgiving yourself? Because that's something that I struggle with. Like when I've found out, whether on purpose or otherwise, that I've wronged someone in some way, I struggle knowing that I've caused them any sort of like pain or discomfort. How do you work on forgiving yourself as part of this?
Well, I think the first step is when Jesus called people to be reborn. His first step was repent. So part of repentance is to actually go to them and ask for forgiveness. You will be surprised. I mean, I'm sure you've already done it, but it's surprising for me when I do that and I see I'm acknowledging to myself that I did something wrong and I'm asking them for forgiveness. Changes everything when that happens.
Well, and if it's like people though, like you've passed on the freeway and you can't actually apologize to them, is it more of a sending it through the waves or?
Well, I think you do the same thing. You just can't do it with them. So
Yeah.
when you get to the next time, you let the people merge back in, like whatever, and you don't get mad at them. It's all those kinds of things. It's the knowing that kind of the difference between loving and repenting, the difference between believing in God and what he's told us to do and not, is that you probably, at least I wasn't repentive. I didn't even know I was doing anything wrong because I wasn't paying any attention. As a matter of fact, you hear all the time, there is no right and wrong for sure. It's, you know, it's kind of, it's relative. It's all dependent on, well, the reality is that's not true. The truth is, I always know when somebody's treating me lovingly, and I always know when they're treating me not lovingly. And so they know when I'm treating them lovingly and not lovingly. Now I can pretend for a while, they could pretend for a while, but in the long run, that never lasts. Eventually, I will know when they're doing something, they're pretending, and then all of a sudden you see the reason why they were pretending. They're still going to try to take advantage of you or something, or you're trying to do the same thing with them. So I think that's the heart of it to me, is repentance. And repentance, if you can ask for forgiveness, you do. If you can't because they went right on the freeway and you are still on the you can't. But the next time you get in a situation like that, you don't get upset. You do everything you can to be nice to the person that was in their position. It's more about what God calls the sanctification process, so that you live a more peaceful life down the road. The next encounter you have is a more peaceful encounter. And when you do one little thing at a time, eventually those add up to big changes in your life, as far as the peace part of it is concerned.
Yeah, when you're talking about going through the intersection,
Mhm.
I think you're in that situation, you're the more aggressive driver. And I think as like an aggressive driver, it can cause you stress.
That's true.
And so if you're letting that go, then you're taking that section of stress out of your life. That one's gone. You know, like me driving down the roads here, and there'll be a bicyclist, two bicyclists, but instead of staying in the bike lane, they'll be visiting and be side by side, and I can't get around them. And I used to get all stressed, you know, like, really, you know, can't you at least follow each other? And it happens all the time here. And I said, okay, I have to get rid of that, because it's going to happen every day. And do I want to be stressed out every day because I feel like they're not doing what's proper? And I said, okay, let's look at it this way. They're talking. What if that person that he's talking to, or she, is considering suicide, or, you know, in a really horrible situation, and this conversation the bikers are having is really important to have right now? Is that more important than me getting to the grocery store 2 minutes faster? And if I put myself in that attitude where, why am I more important going to the grocery store than whatever they're doing? It's not going to make any difference in my life if I wait behind them until I either can safely go around, or we're going different places, or, you know, I've had to let that go. And it's made such a huge difference with all the bikers around here, just having that attitude. Well, okay, they're going up a hill and they're side by side and I can't see what's coming, so I'm going 4 miles an hour up this hill, and I'm just letting it go and saying, but look at the view I get to see. You know, it's beautiful here. And I've just made that part of the routine, and it's another get rid of the stress and the hatred and the you know, the things I was doing wrong. You know, it was wrong of me to be upset with them in front of me. And whether you get to talk to them and tell them you were upset about it or not, you know, you never are. But
Changed.
yeah,
Yeah, you changed.
yes,
That's part of repentance.
yeah, that's
And that's great, because I struggle with dual bikers on the road all the time. And I thought maybe before that, there might be an exception in the Bible for those riding dual bikers, but
And the
you're
book of-
right though, Gail. I should
book of
think about
bicycles.
what, maybe they're talking about something really important, then I can wait. So really helpful.
Wait to hear Tyler's new conversation about them when we pass the dual biker.
Okay,
Roll
well,
down the window. Don't roll down. The window.
Instead, it was like, I figured they're talking about venture capital investment. But maybe not. Maybe they are talking about something that's really helpful. And for someone else.
all right, we're getting close to 8, so I want to make sure we're timetable here for the next meeting. So we'll go on to the next chapter, which is chapter 3, if I remember correctly. And let's see if it is chapter 3. Yeah.
Suspense. Doo-doo-doo-doo.
Speed
Ta-da.
reading.
God's law of love. So we get to spend some time on God's law of love. And I'll send out something with topics if you want to. Do you want me to send topics out, or do you want to just read it and then send me something if you want a topic talked about that you read in the chapter? Go on, give me an opinion.
Read and send.
Read and send. Okay, good. So last time we talked about 2 weeks. So is 2 weeks good? That'll be the 23rd.
I won't be able to go, but that don't mind me. My husband's working, so I'm alone with the 2 babies.
About the 30th? Or do you know?
I think Lindsay's out of town.
Oh, she is.
I know, that's why I'm like, don't mind me, but I'm still gonna read it.
Okay. The 23rd sound okay then? All right.
I can record it and send it to you, Lindsay.
Please do.
Well, actually, all of these are all getting recorded now. If I just make sure I don't shut my machine off when I'm done, I'll hit the button that says convert.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you everyone for participating.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
And
you.
remember, if
And
you
thank you, everyone.
and if you know somebody that you think would like to read the book, if you send me their name and address, I will mail them one. So have a good night, everyone.
Night.
Bye.
Bye, good night.